morning. I hope everyone was thoroughly entertained by our pre-morning entertainment from Kev. I hope that you took something from the demo, maybe, even if it's just knowing what Firmcheck does. We've sometimes with the webinars we get questions of actually what is Firmcheck. As you can see, I am joined by Firmcheck favourite David Winch. How are you going this morning?
I'm good. I'm in a different location, so it's all been a bit hectic this morning. And you're in an egg box, so very exciting.
I am in a shipping container somewhere. No, I'm a little bit nervous about this webinar today, to be honest with you, but I just need to remember we've only invited people that we know to this webinar, basically. So everyone's seen us before, hopefully, and from the chat already kind of starting to bubble. I think these are friendly faces, but I am in Lisbon. I'm in Portugal at the moment. I am doing a digital nomad trip. So I'm actually on my way home to New Zealand from kind of tomorrow. So it's been hectic. But how we going? We're good to go?
Yeah,
Excited
we're good.
to talk about everything?
You're in Portugal. I'm in a shed at the bottom of the garden. But hey, that's how the cookie crumbles, isn't it?
We got a rally for the last webinar of the year, David.
Yeah,
basically.
It's all good.
So awesome. So what are we going to talk about today? Why did you sign up for this webinar? We're going to go over the AML supervision reports that have come out for the year. We'll kind of compare and summarize and discuss all of those outcomes. We'll talk a little bit about the fines that were issued for AML for this year. Also, law changes that are coming through that you should be aware of, and what's happening with Firmcheck in coming 2025. And what we've done that aligns with what the supervisory reports have come out with. Some usual housekeeping. Recordings will be shared afterwards. You'll get an email. You are welcome to share that with other people or members of your team. This will also be on YouTube as well. We're YouTube stars, David. There's a few webinars of us on YouTube. You can drop questions into the chat at any point. We don't have a dedicated Q&A session today, but we will try and reply to those questions in the chat as we go through. And as you can see, the chat is to the right hand side, and you can minimize the chat if it gets frustrating for you also. I'll start off with David's hot take question as I've written them in my notes. We've discussed and reviewed all of the AML supervision reports. Were you surprised by the collective results from the bodies this year?
No, I wasn't surprised. As you know, but I'll explain. We have looked at all the different reports from the different bodies, and we naively thought, didn't we, that what we would do is compare things across the different bodies, and we'd get all the information from all the supervisors' reports and be able to see what was going on. And of course, what we found is that the different supervisors report kind of different information. There's a little bit of common information, but quite a lot that isn't. For example, we looked at how many suspicious activity reports people were making, and there was some information about that on the ICAEW supervision report. So we turned to the ACCA supervision report, and there wasn't. And so our wonderful plan of comparing across didn't quite work out. And it is perhaps a bit unfortunate that the supervisors don't all provide similar comparable information so that you could compare the outcomes. But that's the way.
Like my favorite reports if you can is ACCA, ICAEW and ICB, because they report all in similar ways, but we'll dig in. I just wanted to say a public shout out to Jenna, who just said that she did summer school and she's just passed her AML inspection with flying colours. I will be telling the Firmcheck team that that what we do is important when it comes to education. So thank you, Jenna. That makes it all worth it. It makes it worth it to sit in a random booth in Lisbon in a basement doing this for you guys. So thanks for that. So let's dive in a little bit. With the AML audit focus areas. So whatever body you belong to, we will separate each out as we go along, but most of this is presented collectively. So you can find out what your body was focusing on if you look at the report yourself. But generally there was an emphasis on checking the firm's ability to identify high-risk clients accurately and making sure that those are captured. Always client due diligence is really important and was reviewed during this reporting year. Mainly focusing, I noticed the trend in identification and verification of the people themselves. So that's like your driver's license, that's your addresses, those sorts of elements. Firm-wide risk assessment, guys. We've been talking about it for a year, but it's always an issue and it always comes out as one of the leading areas of non-compliance that firm-wide risk assessments often aren't relevant to the firm. Ongoing client monitoring as well, but why should you care what the supervisory bodies are up to collectively? I explained this to David, like they're all like McDonald's, but I don't think they would like to be explained like they're like McDonald's. McDonald's is internationally, I mean to say. So most are quite similar. Every McDonald's is going to have a Big Mac, but some will have a spicy McChicken or a Kiwi burger if you're in New Zealand, which is disgusting. Don't try it. But there is similarities that can be drawn between all of them. And also too, it's a good indication of what could be coming for your body as well. So ICAEW have set out really clear what would you say, guidance or directives for next year. So that could trickle down to other areas.
Yeah, can I butt in there on you, Sophie, and say, yeah, ICAEW, since you mentioned them, one of the things that they've talked about is trying to assess not just whether you've ticked all the boxes, but actually whether what you do achieves the objective of deterring or preventing money laundering. And it's kind of been a shift of focus. And I suspect that the other bodies will be sort of moving in that direction in future. In effect, they're not saying, have you done it? Have you ticked everything? They're saying, does it work for you? You know, which is an interesting take. And we'll maybe discuss that later on.
You wouldn't think that we've planned this webinar out, but we have. We're leading with information we're going to present you. So also too, in the reports, and again, look for what's relevant in yours, but they often indicate what's going to be coming through for the next reporting year. So ICAEW have very clearly said that they're going to be looking at your firm-wide risk assessment. So what I would recommend is if in the coming year that you get notified that you're going to be audited, have a wee peek at the previous year's supervision report for a bit of an indication of what they're intending to look at in areas of non-compliance from the year previous, as a wee bit of a checklist of how to kind of get yourself up to speed. But similar across, again, it's always the same areas that we come across and that we talk about as well. Something that's always consistent is education in AML. So for me, I'm a really big believer, if you empower people with education, they'll make smarter decisions. Most often than not. But education and the recording of education is a consistent theme in the supervision reports and recording of that as well. This counts as education for your team. I will be giving you a certificate of your participation at the end of the webinar, so you have to stay. I'm so sorry, but you need to be recording that. But Firmcheck does lots of free webinars like this one, and we also have courses. And to toot my horn, we ran the first industry leading AML summit in February, and we might be doing it again. Just maybe in February, but it's called something else. It's Dada Summit. I'll leave the chat to have a guess what that first word might be before proceeding summit. But you know it, eh, David?
Yeah.
What we're doing?
Yeah, I've got some idea, yes.
David knows all my secrets. So let's have a look at the volume of firms audited. So this is important to kind of understand maybe we could say the likelihood that you'd be audited, maybe, or the kind of output that these supervisory bodies are taking. Obviously, ICAEW, we would say in New Zealand, are doing the mahi. Mahi means work. So they said in their webinar that they are aiming to audit about 10% of their members. It's really hard to say what factors influence how many are being audited each year. I wasn't able to get an answer from some supervisory body friends on what determines this. Do you? I'm going off topic even though we've planned, David, but do you know?
Well, I do know that all the supervisory bodies do risk assess their firms. Everybody fills in an annual return to their supervisory body, and based on that information, the firms risk assess. The supervisory bodies risk assess their firms, and then they try and focus most of their audits on the higher risk ones, sensibly. But one of the supervisory bodies I noticed produced some figures as to how they'd found out doing visits that their actual risk assessments were not correct, and they upped or downed the risk of firms when they actually got to see them. So maybe that isn't such a great tool as they think it is, but clearly ICAEW is the biggest in terms of the number of members, and therefore the biggest in terms of the number of reviews.
Yeah.
And at the other end of the scale, we've got SEMA, who haven't got a heck of a lot of members in practice, and so haven't done a whole bunch of reviews. But I know that there are some bodies that didn't make it onto this graph because it could have been just, if we included the Irish chartered accountants that also supervise some people in the UK, and so on and so on. So the graph would go on forever, wouldn't it? But yeah, some interesting changes that ICB, I think we're going to mention ICB again. Some of their changes look startling, but that may be just a different approach that they've taken this past year to what they do and how they categorize the results.
Yeah, and I think this is a really great example to demonstrate why comparing all the supervisory bodies together is relevant to this discussion. For me, from where I sit, ICAEW is leading the pack, and that is what should be the level. Like just as an external observer who has a minor amount of awareness of anti-money laundering, but that should be the volumes that are being undertaken by the supervisory bodies. So again, I would suggest that we will see somewhat of an increase in the pool of firms getting audited year on year, just based on what ICAEW is doing, and kind of they describe it as leveling up. Really, they're leveling up their expectations and their supervisory actions. Okay.
And also, can I just say, AAT? Sorry, Sophie. AAT supervisory visits are actually conducted by ICAEW staff. They've kind of subcontracted
that
it.
That is right. Yeah, that's actually right.
So whatever ICAEW are doing affects AAT directly straight away.
Yeah. And you can no, I'm pulling numbers. I was going to say you can kind of see that, but no, I'm making up stuff, and I shouldn't. That's why you're here, David. So I don't make up stuff. So some areas, just some definitions of compliance, because I found generally compliant really hard to get my head around. These definitions came from the ACCA supervision report. To me, compliant is there wasn't anything found that you're not doing correctly. There wasn't any missing documentation. There wasn't any lack of process. Everything's relevant. It's perfect. It's gold star. Generally, compliant is when the I'm going to use really soft language, but the intention of the firm is in the right place. So they are trying. Most of the processes that are in place are kind of working. There might be some documents missing here or there, but overall they are making an effort, I would say. So it's like a participation badge to me.
Yeah. When I'm working with firms, I generally say, look, we're aiming for generally compliant, because you will not get 100.0% of things correct.
Yeah.
If you're generally compliant, that's good. Having said that, the bodies do say, right, if you're generally compliant, they will give you a list of things that you need to address, and you do need to address those things before they come again.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, and I'll talk to that to the next slide as well. I think that's really important, that just because you're categorized as generally compliant doesn't mean that you're in the clear. Not compliant, when looking into it, it's often an ignorance towards AML compliance. So it's like not an awareness of it, no efforts made to it, no process, missing documentation. Looking at reasons why firms are non-compliant is usually persistent ignoring of the offering hand of help from the supervisory body. So to be categorized as not compliant is like detention. You've been given some indication before you're there. That's kind of how I interpret it. But that's why I've put the proper definitions on the screen, rather than just my thoughts. But the, what do you call it? Piece de response? The Mona Lisa of why we're here today. Yeah, there we go. Okay. I got there. Is this beautiful graph that has broken my brain in half to create. So I know that we have a lot of different members on the call today from different supervisory bodies, so just wanted to ensure as many as I could include are here. Damn though, really varied results. We can see obviously in the pink color the astronomical, in my opinion, again, increase in firms being categorized as generally compliant. Why, David, do you think we're seeing such a huge increase in the category of generally compliant? Do we think it's relaxed attitude from the supervisory auditors being like, oh, we'll just put you in generally compliant? Or is it more firms moving, along the scale out of non-compliance into more of a complete compliance category?
I think, Sophie, perhaps you should take all the credit for this, but there has been a lot of noise, hasn't there? A lot of banging on about AML. I'm sure a lot of people are sick on about AML, but firms are aware of AML. They're aware of what they're supposed to do. They may not be aware of 100% of what they're supposed to do, but they know that they've got to do ID. They know that they've got to do risk assessments. They know that they've got to do a firm-wide risk assessment, and they've got to have a policies and procedures document. So all these things that they are getting in place. Where they are perhaps not quite getting it right, or not quite recording it enough, and actually this was something Kevin mentioned in his review of the Firmcheck software before, is that where you have identified a risk, you will need to then go on and say how you are addressing that risk, what you're doing about it, and you need to have a record of that. And quick plug, that the Firmcheck system does allow you to do that, and does indeed encourage you to do that by opening up a comment box which sort of stares blankly at you, so that you have to write something in there.
Yeah, honestly, anyone that wants to be my friend, just do what David did and just naturally plug Firmcheck into the conversation, and we'll be friends for life. But that is true. Like, the Firmcheck product is designed specifically for you guys. Like, we designed it for accountants and bookkeepers in the UK. So it's not some random software from America or New Zealand that we brought in and just kind of like put it here and you want it or not. It's specific for you guys. Some things I just want to call out from this graph, which is really beautifully colored, is ICAEW in their supervision report said that they are going to take a harder approach to AML audits from the previous reporting period to this reporting period. So there is a little bit of an increase in firms that are found to not be compliant. So if you are an ICAEW member, just be aware that they are starting to year on year make that process more stringent. I'm not going to say difficult, but more stringent. And you can see that in how many firms are categorized as not compliant. ICB as well, they don't categorize firms in a generally compliant bucket. So this is another great example of how the different McDonald's across the world. ICB doesn't have a spicy McChicken. They don't have a generally compliant bucket. They take a harder line, but obviously it doesn't impact their compliance percentage too much because they still sit around that 92.80%. SEMA is a difficult one as well. They only published that they had 97.30% compliance. See anything else startling here? This is all to be kind of expected, no?
Yeah, it is a bit disappointing that ICAEW said that nearly 20% of the firms they checked were not compliant. One of the things, as you know, Sophie, is that when you get a report following a review, it actually doesn't say which bucket they're putting you into in terms of compliant, generally compliant or not compliant, but it should be pretty obvious. What you get is a list of things that you need to address. And depending on how long that list is, you might guess as to whether they've put you into the not compliant bucket or the generally.
Yeah. And I don't mean to honk on about ICAEW again. Please, someone in the chat, just tell me if there's one member here, it's worth it for me. But they said that they were disappointed in firms that had been previously categorized as generally compliant who were then re-audited. They found that those firms hadn't completed the actions that they were asked to undertake from their last audit, so then were then classed as not compliant following. So if you get a list from your auditor of things that you need to check, you need to do them. It's not a list of recommendations. It would be nice if you would do. When they come back around again, they will be checking against that list and making sure that you made those actions so that you can show that you understand and that you're demonstrating a level of progress. Yeah,
absolutely. I remember for a previous presentation we were talking about doing a presentation on how to fail your AML review. And in the end, we didn't go ahead with that, you and I. But one of the things that we said, how to really wind up your supervisory body is to promise to do something and then not do it. And, you know, I'm always doing that with my wife. And, you know, I'll wash the dishes and I'll take the dog out. Now, I didn't get around to it. Sorry. Well, that's not acceptable to her, and it's not acceptable to your body either.
Yeah, and that's probably a really good example. That's another really good way to describe it, I think. So just some stats. Let's see, ICAS, 27% of the firms that were found to be non-compliant was failures in identity verification. ACCA stated that a lack of relevant firm-wide risk assessment was the leading cause of non-compliance. Same for policy controls and procedures documentation and lack of AML training. Something interesting here I found was the failure to identify clients correctly as well. So again, when someone comes to audit you, they will take a portion of your clients and see if they can find more information on your client than what you've disclosed. So again, ICAEW, I'm really sorry, but they have the most amount of resource around what they've done with their supervision reports. But they've said that they will come into your firm, take a portion of your clients, do a Google search, Companies House search, and if they can find more information on your client than what you've disclosed, then you're in trouble. But they didn't say it like that, but you're in trouble.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Yes.
Perfect.
I was talking to somebody who Googled their client only to find he was in prison, and that was why he wasn't answering his emails.
Well, it's opposite for me. If I'm not answering the emails, it's usually because I'm traveling at the moment, or from next week I'll be asleep at this time because in New Zealand time zone, not just sleeping on the job. My IAB friends, again, I'm hoping there's IAB people here. Really big fan of IAB as well. I emailed them to ask them for comments on their reports, and they replied really quickly. So kudos to them. Thank you for that. So from here, we can see a similar number of inspections completed compared to year previous, similar percentage of firms issued mandatory action plans. So this is another really great example of how all the information is differing, and it's really hard to compare because they've said mandatory action plans. Is that an informal action, which is what ACCA would call it? There's an increase in fines. So you can see previous reporting period was £4,463, jumped up to £30,000, but confirmed with them that that was just 1 or 2 bad actors. But that's your results from IAB. Now, I kind of wanted to put everybody in a pool again, so we can see such a large portion that 60% are categorized as generally compliant, and then a 20-20 split between not compliant and compliant. So this is for all of the bodies that we've disclosed in this webinar here. And as we said before, generally compliant doesn't mean that you're straight and narrow. Again, David, like if you had to take a guess before seeing this data, would you guess that this would be about what we would see, or again, are you surprised?
I'm a bit disappointed to see 20% as not compliant.
Yeah, same.
I sometimes I speak to firms who, and we've had MLR for 20 years, and sometimes I speak to firms who've basically done nothing.
Yeah.
I was talking to one guy, and he put on his documents, which he submitted to his supervisory bodies, he put, maybe I'll do that. And as you can imagine,
when I feel like it.
Yeah, that went down like the proverbial lead balloon with his supervisory body. Maybe I'll do that isn't what you're supposed to be saying to them, please.
Yeah,
but
that's
full
fascinating.
marks for honesty, but hey.
Maybe it's that casual approach that is maybe what's leading them into non-compliance.
What I do like to, I'm sorry.
What would I like to say?
No, I'm not interested in what you'd like to say, Sophie. No, I'm going to speak. What I do like to see is that the supervisory bodies are tending more to say, here's your action plan, rather than here's your fine. Here's your action plan. These are the things we want you to do over the next 12 months. We'll be back in 12 months' time to see if you've done them, which to me seems a much more positive and useful approach than just slap a fine on and put you into disciplinary and we'll suspend your practicing certificate and we'll,
I'll talk now, actually.
Yes.
I've got something to say about that. Again, I suspect my crystal ball tells me that fines are generally seen as ineffective. I might be putting my foot in it here. We were talking to a firm who had said that, like, Firmcheck is a software, talking to a firm who said they'd been fined, and they said, can't be bothered, I'll just take the fine. Like, can't be bothered working on my AML compliance, I'll just take the fine, which is ballsy. But what I feel like is going to start happening, I do have some data points, is that supervisory bodies will not use fines as much as they have, but more create house arrest or probation sort of ramification. So one of those that is proposed is mandatory education, mandatory classes, those sorts of elements. I'd be really curious for people that are here today, or to comment if you feel comfortable in doing so. Actually, I think I have a poll question. How do these? Oh, maybe not. Oh yeah, thanks, Kev. I usually had a Nathan, but Nathan's not here, so now I have a Kev. But I would love to understand, like, do you feel like you would rather take a fine, or would you rather take a probation period of mandatory education or something like that? So change in non-compliant firms. So I thought this was interesting to share, but again, kind of a wee bit difficult in terms of the percentage difference in how many firms were found to be non-compliant. I just want to caveat here as well. This is kind of difficult because each year the supervisory body takes a different pool of people than they did the year before. So it's not comparing the same people year on year. And I fear that's where the ICB had their 81.88% come from. That's now dropped to 7.19%. I'm sure internally they were like, yeah, great, like huge, massive drop. But it's also proportionate to who they find within that pool. AAT had gone from 37% to 21.52%, which is still a large portion. And as I said, data is only from the reported figures. Other reported figures, if anybody's interested, ACCA the reporting year previous was 7.10% non-compliant up to 7.21%, so 0.10%. I'm not a maths person, as David knows from trying to create these graphs, but yeah, slight increases, but nothing too dramatic here. Cool. So we're running on time, which is amazing. But we've already kind of covered some of the areas of non-compliance. One I want to call out as well is failure to report SARS or failure to report relevant SARS. I really wanted to get an answer on how many SARS are submitted in the UK each year, but that was a little bit difficult to come across in time for this webinar. But SAR reporting is really critical, as in all of the supervisory reports, it states that if that they will review the SARS submitted, and if there isn't SARS submitted, it's not a red flag, but it's a little bit of a, that's curious, let's look into it further. I think we don't talk about SARS enough, so that's my 2025 vision, talk about SARS more.
I think all the firms that reported said that the majority of the firms they reviewed didn't submit any SARS. And so that doesn't necessarily put you on the naughty step, but then the supervisory body, as you say, is thinking, well, why is that? Is that because there was nothing to report, or is that because they were asleep at the wheel and they missed stuff?
Yeah.
But don't report just for the sake of reporting, so that you can say, hey, I did a report this year.
Yeah, because that's naughty as well. It's about the quality of the report and the accuracy of the report. I actually have made a course on SARS, if anyone's interested. It's on education tab on Firmcheck. Let's look at the fines related to AML failures. Obviously, Starling Bank was really noisy with getting their £29 million fine. It was actually meant to be £40 million. I'd love that in my pocket myself. But they got a 30% discount because they agreed to make changes. But why that happened, inadequate financial sanctions screening all the way from 2017, non-compliance with regulatory requirements despite agreeing to not open accounts for high-risk customers, and rapid growth outpacing controls, which I think is relevant for accounting and bookkeeping firms that are here today. They had, from my information here, they expanded from 43,000 customers to 3.6 million between 2017 and 2023. So why that's relevant for you guys is that if you are, buying firms and taking on other accounting firms, or if you're looking at increasing your client numbers suddenly, you've got to make sure that your AML compliance keeps up to pace with that pool of clients. And same for if you take on new services, so say cryptocurrency, you've got to ensure that you include that within your AML controls. Metro Bank as well, this one didn't hit too many inboxes, but they were fined 16.7 million again. Again, it was actually meant to be 23 million. Failures in transaction monitoring and unaddressed internal concerns. So junior staff raised issues about unmonitored transaction data that were not adequately addressed by senior management. David, how do these large fines from these banks relate to those that could be imposed on accountants and bookkeepers? Is this an indication? Is this an indication of what's to come, or is this just noise?
I think, frankly, I shouldn't say this, but as accountants, we're probably thinking, great, stick it to the banks. Go on, find those miserable banks. But would be interesting, wouldn't it, if one of the big accountancy firms, your PwCs or your KPMGs or whatever, got a massive fine? That'd be fascinating. Hopefully it's not going to happen. I mean, they do get massive fines for failing audits, but hopefully they've got their money laundering tickety-boo and all sorted. You've mentioned there the total fines from supervisory bodies, 300,000. The average £3,000 to £6,000. I do think for accountants, The penalty, if you like, is not the fine. When you get to the far end and you know what the fine is, and you've got to get your debit card out or whatever, or your bank transfer and pay it, it's generally with a huge sigh of relief. Thank goodness that's over with. The problem for accountants is that if you get put on the naughty step, you are going to get so much questioning and so much inquiry from your supervisory body. It's really going to be a pain. And I remember last year, somebody got a letter from the ACCA saying we need a reply within 21 days. And this letter was sent on the 15th of December. So 21 days included all the Christmas break, all the New Year break, plus, of course, the general January rush of self-assessments. And it was really, really tough for the guy to try and respond in that time. And you just don't need that grief from your supervisory body. You want to try and get into the generally compliant. As one of our members said in the chat, had a couple of things I had to deal with. I managed to deal with them in the next month or two. That's great. That's a great result. What you don't want is we're sending you for disciplinary and so on, all the grief. So the fine isn't, what I'm saying is the fine is not the penalty. The grief is the penalty of having to deal with your supervisory body.
Yeah, and I suppose it's like on a personal level, like a credit report, like your credit rating, right? And you can pay the $2,000 overdrawn fee or whatever it was, but still 5 years later you can't get a mortgage. It's somewhat similar in that it does follow you around.
Well, if you have more trouble in the future with your supervisory body, then of course your disciplinary record will come up, and you're likely to be accelerated for the next visit and all this sort of thing.
Okay, so the sentiment here is be nice, not naughty.
Yes, don't get yourself on the naughty step, please.
And just to highlight what David said as well, what is going to be interesting, or what the crystal ball will say, is that when one of the big five of PwC, what is EY, whatever, when they get fined for AML non-compliance, that is an indication of blood in the water, and then that will be something to say about what that knock-on effect could be. But these big noisy ones from big banks aren't really relevant for you guys. And you also to proportionate, like as I said, Starling Bank has where did I say it? 3.6 million customers. Does anybody on this webinar have 3.6 million customers? And if you do, great, but it's also proportionate. Fantastic. Right, let's talk to UK's Company House incoming changes. Who's aware of this? Is everybody aware of this? I'm trying to get the chat warmed, guys. Did you know that there was changes coming to Companies House? It was announced at Accountex Manchester. We were across from HMRC when they were saying it, and we were like, hang on, what is HMRC saying? Do you mind talking, because we need someone to actually say definitively what's going on? I'm going to pass over to David so that you don't hear my thoughts and opinions. What's happening, David?
Some of it's already happened, in that from the spring this year, there have been new rules, which actually I've only fairly recently picked up on, related to registered office addresses. So every company has to have a registered office address. And in the past, quite a few companies have had PO box addresses, for example. PO box addresses are now no longer acceptable to Companies House. And what they are doing is they are ripping those addresses off the register, and instead changing the company's registered office address to Companies House itself, which is a bit weird. And then the company has 28 days to register a proper registered office with Companies House. And if you fail to do that, they start the procedure to have that company struck off. That takes a couple of months to work through, but it's kind of bad news if your client is going to be struck off because the bank start freezing their account and all sorts of stuff happens. So that's already happening. Of course, we've got MTD, which we're not going to talk about, but MTD is like a nightmare on the horizon for a lot of accountants. And at the same time, we've got these changes at Companies House where one of the things that they are going to do is require identification of all company directors and all company PSCs, persons of significant control. They are going to require them to be ID'd, and they are saying this will be a quick and easy process. And I'm a bit doubtful when government says to me this is going to be quick and easy, because it's usually painful and awkward. It'll be similar to the government ID, do they call it one login system that we already have, but also companies are going to be told that your accountant can verify your ID and can tell Companies House that it's been verified. And you're thinking, great, that's because I have verified everybody. So I'll just tell Companies House it's all done. All my clients are done. It's fine. And then Companies House are going to come back and say, how have you verified those IDs? Have you done it to the standard that we would like? And the standard that they would like, for example, involves seeing a passport and a driving license. Now, for AML purposes, we haven't said you need to see a passport and a driving license. We've said you need to see one or other, and perhaps something else, a utility bill or a bank statement or something. So it may be that Companies House is then going to say, no, that's not satisfactory. We need more ID. And all this is going to make extra work for accountants, for which your client really isn't going to want to pay you. And you're also going to try and do all the other stuff and get ready for MTD and everything else. So it is a potential pain in the neck. Also, I am a bit concerned that a lot of PSC information at Companies House is actually not correct and not up to date. And therefore, the Companies House, who presumably will look to the PSC register to see who the PSCs are, if they're getting that wrong, they'll be asking for ID for the wrong people, and then you're going to have to update the PSC register. So I can just see all this being something of a pain. But what can you do? What you put on the slide, Sophie? What can you do to prepare? Two things I would say. One is try and get your director information and your PSC information at Companies House up to date and correct. And remember that getting a confirmation statement up to date and correct doesn't, unfortunately, update the PSC information. You have to send in a separate form to update the PSC register. And the other thing is that from the spring of next year, accountants and other professionals will be permitted to, as it were, register with Companies House as corporate service providers who will be allowed to file stuff on behalf of their clients. So you might need to get that registration done in the spring, hopefully at a time when it isn't a particularly busy time of year for you. Get that registration done, get it sorted, and then you'll be in the best position to help your clients.
I've been watching the chat, and it's so great to see Minnie and Claire kind of sorting out and like talking about what things mean and helping each other out. That is one of my favorite things about our webinars, is that everyone kind of comes together and talks about things. Yeah, I am going to be really inflammatory. I think this might be an incoming apocalypse, to be honest with you. I think there's going to be so many issues because I see it in Firmcheck, like when we're helping onboard people, and there's a Companies House integration into Firmcheck, and the accountant or bookkeeper goes, oh, that person's not there anymore. It's pulled through the PSC. And then the accountant goes, oh, that person's not there. I'm like, well, it says it is in Companies House, so what are you going to do? So I think I really would encourage people to find ways to keep up to date with what's happening, because it's still, the complete picture is not entirely clear as yet, but it is coming. So as David said, probably what I would do is do a mini audit on your own client data if you can. If you think that there might be spaces where you don't have complete identification documents, or where things might be incorrect, just have a poke around, because you want to be ahead of the wave, not behind the wave with everybody scrambling and freaking out, which is why I wanted to include this really important point here. Because yeah, we're all with it. This group is with it, so we want to be with it.
Can I make 2 quick points? One is that, without wishing to be too much of a pain in the back, under the MLR, we are supposed to extract information from the PSC register. We are supposed to check it. So if you're not doing anything at all about that, then that will be picked up by your supervisor on your next review. And the other thing is, Claire helpfully mentions lots of people use their accountant's office as the registered office address. Yep, nothing wrong with that, but do remember that makes you a trust and company service provider, and that may affect your AML and your supervision arrangements. So make sure your supervisory body knows that you are a trust and company service provider if you are offering registered office.
Perfect. Other news as well, of maybe not of lesser quality, but still really important, but just more of an awareness. Domestic pets are now classified as lesser risk compared to non-domestic pets, as long as there's no other high risk factors present. There was actually an article when the election came through of how politicians were finding it really difficult to get bank accounts and things like that, and they felt like it was really unfair, which sounds like something a politician would say. So that's come through that they're now, but it doesn't mean that they're low risk inherently. It just means that they're not automatically categorized as at high risk. There's ongoing consultation on the effectiveness of the MLRs. This was in June, and they're still awaiting soon on the public report on that feedback, which I think is going to be, again, apocalyptic when that comes through. Hopefully they say something interesting. If they just say everything's fine, then that's not right. But yeah, we'll see.
Conveniently, we did have a change of government in the middle of all that.
Yes, yeah. So that might
delay stuff a bit. Yeah.
Yes. And then additions to the FATF grey list.
Financial Action Task Force.
Yeah. So added countries that have been put under increased anti-money laundering supervision. Is that what you would say?
They're more high risk. And
thank you.
So if you've got clients who are trading with, let's say, Algeria, taking the first one, then you've got to be a little bit more high profile in your AML checking.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. Okay. Well, that's kind of everything we wanted to cover in terms of what's happened for the year. I'm going off topic, David. Could I have a little summary of how you have felt about AML this year? If you could give AML in the UK a report card, what would be on it?
Well, now, I think
I have put you on the spot.
could do better, but yeah, improving. I think that, as I said, there is a lot of noise about AML. You must be living in a cave somewhere if you've not thought of AML or not come across anything about AML over the past year. So yeah, but I think the supervisory bodies are, again, kind of moving the goalposts slightly and saying, yeah, okay, so you do everything, but does it work? And that will be the story as we go forward, that it will get, standards will get higher and expectations will get higher.
Yeah, it's not something I would say about this group that we have here viewing us today, but I would say there's a lack of commitment from accountants and bookkeepers. Sometimes they go, I know I need to make it a priority, but I just don't have the time. But it's also on the supervisory body side as well of how public are they? Like, how readily are they there to help you, and how loud are they publicizing those services? So there's that too. There is still some work that can be done to help you guys out there too, right? Would you say?
Shall I tell you a secret?
Okay.
The OPBAS did actually severely criticize a couple of the supervisory bodies, and they won't say which ones they are, but they actually sent them directions. You must do this better. So OPBAS is kind of gearing up on the supervisory bodies, and that will mean, of course, the supervisory bodies gearing up again on us.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's high time that we get ahead of the wave, everybody. We just got to make that movement, make a commitment, get it done, and then we can look behind us and see. Well, that's really philosophical. Sorry. My brain's starting to fry. There's not proper aircon in this unit, so my face is gradually getting redder. Ignore me. Did you?
But yeah, and with MTD as well happening, people are going to have a lot on their plate over the next couple of years.
It's always difficult. I wish I had something more optimistic to say. I'm so sorry.
Let's be cheerful. It's nearly Christmas.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's bring on my favorite Scot, Kevin Lord. There we go. So Kevin's going to talk a little bit around what Firmcheck has done this year, what Firmcheck's doing next year as well. If you use a different software, or if you don't want to use Firmcheck, I would still encourage you to listen. I've told him very distinctly, it's not a sales pitch, but I think what's really valuable within what Kevin's going to talk about is talking about the process of AML. So if you're managing things manually, he'll talk to what those things can look like if you do it manually, but it's always better if you do it in Firmcheck. Is that a good intro?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, I'll move David and I away and leave you for the last couple of minutes, and then I'll come back.
No
Okay?
problem. Thank you very much. And I know Sophie said that she was nervous for that today, but didn't have to be whatsoever. So fantastic amounts of content there and information. And I'll just flick on the chat box just to see if any chat comes there. And yeah, like I'm only going to talk for maybe 5-10 minutes just about how we have reacted to the changes that Sophie and David spoke about this year, and how you can manage that in Firmcheck, and also how we are looking to react moving forward. I think I was taking a lot of notes there as it was going on, and I was looking at the polls. And if you look at the data, actually, you know, most firms are in that generally compliant bucket. You know, 20% aren't. They would say that's upsetting. But then if you look at the human emotion of it, you know, almost everyone said it's getting harder to be compliant. It's a real pain in the backside. And just as we were ending there, you know, yes, you've got MTD. Yes, there's going to be more stuff expected of you. So it's only going to get harder. And especially if you're using manual processes or numerous bits of software or manual software, then actually just managing in that and getting a visual of it is really difficult. If we go back to the house chores analogy that David gave about, you know, doing the dishes or walking the dog, I'll blame my kids rather than me. But you know, my son at the minute is football daft. He constantly puts his football strips on and leaves them about the house. And when we tell him to tidy it up, he'll put it in a drawer, he'll put it under his bed, he'll put some in the cupboard. Yet when it's me or my wife tidying up, it goes in the cupboard and we know exactly where it is. So when he then cries the next day and says, "Where's my Barcelona strip?" we can get it right away. And whereas if it's when he tidies it, it could be in one of numerous places. So that's my little bit of analogy there on it. So I'll just fly through this very, very quickly. Key themes in the supervision report. Helen, keep that thought there for you. The firm's AML documentation was found to be inconsistent and missing the key required documents, the better CDD process. They need to complete firm-wide risk assessments, and they need to firms to monitor clients on an ongoing basis. So what was our response to that? And in September this year, we completely rebuilt Firmcheck. If you've been a new client from Firmcheck from September, you'll be using the new platform. Our existing clients will be getting migrated starting this week and into next week, so you'll be able to do that. So our response, you know, yes, you can now run your entire AML compliance process in one place. It's all completed and stored in Firmcheck, whether that be your risk assessments, your determinations, your client ID, your ongoing monitoring. It's all in one place. So going back to where's my football strip, Daddy, it's there. It's in one place, and you can manage that there. We also have new ID verification options in Firmcheck. So yeah, you can take physical ID and drag and drop it into the software. manually verify it. Do these match the details that we're pulling in from different softwares? That's great. But you can also run electronic checks without physical copies of ID. So you can put in the person's name, address, date of birth, and we will go and do electronic search for that. We do have the PEPs, sanctions, and adverse media searches as well, and we've always had that. But going on to the changes from UK Companies House, you can also complete full biometric searches for your clients as well via the software, which is great. All of those electronic searches are pay-as-you-go, so you don't need to buy in bulk and have them all there. And due to the changes in our software and negotiating with our data providers, they're actually at a reduced cost as what they've been before, which is great. We now have firm-wide risk assessments in Firmcheck, and these dynamically update as you're adding client data into Firmcheck. So again, going back to the supervisory reports, you know, it was an updated firm-wide risk assessment. So we have that, and we can show you there. And like I just said, ongoing monitoring is now live in Firmcheck. So those PEP sanctions and adverse media is live, and if there's any changes to that, then you know we will notify you, and then you can go and make the relevant changes there. This year, it was the biggest year in history of Earth of political elections. I think something like 70–80% of the world's population voted this year. So you know, those lists change all the time. And as the guy said, domestic PEPs are now seen differently as well. So again, the knock-on impact that has as well. Just a little screenshots of what it looks like as well. So much cleaner, easier to use. Going back to that football strip analogy, you know, you can quickly spot what needs done, what needs checked, what needs reviewed, anything that's assigned to you, any alerts that come monitoring. Now, Helen said, I can't remember, but does Firmcheck email you when a client's ID is nearly out of date? We won't necessarily email you at the minute, and the system doesn't have that functionality, but you can build reports in the system to say when clients IDs are nearly out of date. Again, it kind of depends on the supervisory body. So if you go to ICAW, for example, they stressed this year that there was an over reliance, if you like, on getting new ID, and a lot of firms prioritize getting new passports because that was out of date, and they thought that was AML. But again, depending on your supervisory body, is that relevant? But long story short, we can build notifications and reports for you that flag when certain bits of identification are out of date, and then you can go and manage it. The next one is our ID verifying and document uploading. So we have a range of options there, so you can drag and drop. As you can see, I've done option 1 there. Our electronic checks have carried out there, and then we have the biometric checks here as well. Now, as I'm on that page, you can see that we've pulled in the CDD level up at the top right and identified the risk levels here and added more information. So again, we're just flagging how that is there. And then the final screenshot is the firm-wide risk assessment area that you can now do in the software. That summary that you can see there, where it says 8 clients have there, 1 client does this, that is all being dynamically pulled into the software. So I did not type any of that up. And if you watch the little demo video that we done at the start, and I think there's a chance to watch it at the end, you'll see that when I went in to create that, a lot of this information was pulled there. Now, are we doing the firm-wide risk assessment for you? Absolutely not. Are we helping you and giving you the data that you need to keep that nice and fresh and updated? Yes, we are. Okay, nearly there. Final couple of slides now. So David and Sophie expertly spoke about the expectations of what's coming up next year. So we've got a supervisory focus. What are they looking on? So again, accurate and updated firm-wide risk assessments, accurate documentation when it comes to risk profile, enhanced client ID, and up-to-date staff records. Our response to that, what you can expect from Firmcheck in the next year, is a smart rule-based risk assessments based on your client. So you'll be able to almost put a scoring system into Firmcheck super dependent on your risk appetite as a practice. You know, going to Sophie's point, you know, every McDonald's is different. Every practice has a different risk appetite that's important to you. You can put a scoring system in there that will automatically then update your firm's risk profile going there. We're super excited about launching our API next year, and the possibilities of that are kind of endless when it comes to integrations. Yes, from a data point of view, pulling information from your practice management systems, but then looking at that company house need for biometric checks. You know, is there a vision that you could run those checks in Firmcheck and push that into UK's company's house? Going to Sophie's point and David's point about ICAW, really focusing on, does your risk mitigations actually work? Well, could we integrate with a Xero, a free agent, a QuickBooks to look at the source of funds and source of wealth to show that actually you're really looking into that. We've got international business and personal AML checks, and then your staff records will be kept within Firmcheck and easily shareable as well. So again, you can expect a lot of this early next year, and we're moving as the goalposts are changing, like David said. Now, going back to the 2024 updates, you can register for Firmcheck, sign up to Firmcheck, and take advantage of all of that now, if you like, completely free, and we have a free demo of the software there as well.
We don't say it enough. You can actually try Firmcheck for free. You can try Firmcheck for free today. Just click the link below. Like, you can go in and click around the software, do an ID check on yourself, see what gossip is on you out in the world, and see how that looks. Yeah, as you can see, Kevin just popped that down there. Far out, big webinar. We're finishing on time-ish, which is new for us, but I'm glad we got to the end of the year. As I said, you can sign up for Firmcheck for free. My favorite thing is getting compromising photos of Kev. I have another 4 I could use. He was in this picture trying to show me an issue that we were having in the product one day when we were on tour. So up in Edinburgh, but anyway, funny. You can connect with David on LinkedIn. He posts a lot of Firmcheck content, but he also talks a lot about AML stuff that's happening in the industry and updates. And please follow Firmcheck on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place for you to hear about what we're doing, where we are, webinars, content, things like that. Again, another compromising picture. This was from our first birthday at Accountex North, where someone let me have a balloon modeler. So we had balloon hats because it was our first birthday. But I will pop up the QR code for the certificate now. Oh, I didn't mean to do it that way. Use the link. I'll put the link here. Sorry. There you go. Click that, put in your name, you get your certificate. In New Zealand, we say Merry Kirimi, which means Merry Christmas. But thank you everyone for this year. It has been a big fat year, really busy. And yeah, it's only going to get busier next year. Really. But thank you so much for everybody that made it today. And I look forward to seeing you in 2025. Fantastic. Bye.